Sure, all rain is unpleasant, but like humans and animals, not all rain is alike.
I'm gonna make it actually stop.
In fact, some showers are so weird that you could easily mistake it for a nightmare or some kind of wild LSD trip that I know nothing about. From an extraordinary downpouring of fish to a frankly terrifying arachnophobic ordeal, here are the 15 most unusual rains in the world. Rain of fish. As anybody that reads the Bible knows, there seems to be no limit to the power that God has. He can do anything from turning water into wine, walking on water, and apparently making fish fall from the sky. The last one is the legendary story of Father Jose Manuel Subirana, a Spanish missionary in the mid-1850s. The story goes that Father Subirana had visited Lloro in Honduras, where the locals were poor, hungry, and suffering. Subirana prayed for 3 full days and nights to God, hoping that he would be able to feed those that were starving on the streets. Sure enough, the sky turned dark, and as if by magic, fish began to rain from the sky all over the city. This was the first recorded rain of fish, but it turned out to be far from the last. According to residents of Lloro, this unusual rain of fish is something that continues to happen at least once per year, in May or June, making this an incredible trend that many believe is an act of God. Sure, why not? Or this centipede will crawl on your face when you're sleeping. Rain of spiders. There are probably more people with a fear of spiders in the world than any type of fear. There's just something about these freaky 8-legged beasts that strikes the fear of God into the hearts of many. So, the very idea of these nightmarish things falling from the sky is less than thrilling. This unusual phenomenon has often been reported in southeastern Brazil, where the summer has been rife with rising temperatures and a whole lot of falling arachnids. The residents in rural Minas Gerais state have reported an almost yearly phenomenon of spiders falling from the sky when temperatures reach significantly hot and humid levels. Experts have offered a number of rational explanations for the unusual rain, including the theory that they're just spiders that were picked up by the wind and dropped. But locals don't really believe that, and yet have no real idea why this is happening. Thankfully, this phenomenon seems to be limited to the humidity of Brazil, which is obviously incredibly unfortunate for any arachnophobes over there. Although I think the other worldwide arachnophobes are a little relieved. I am anyway. Rain of meat. While I think we can all agree that the world has more significant problems, it's worth pointing out that sometimes fresh meat can be pretty expensive. But if you're comfortable eating questionable meats you find on the sidewalk, we may have a solution for that. In 1876, a mysterious phenomenon hit Bath County, Kentucky. Large hunks of meat began falling from the sky like large, fleshy snowflakes. The story gained so much traction in the community that the New York Times arrived to investigate what many claimed was falling hunks of beef.
Not only was meat falling from the sky,
but it wasn't until 3 months later that someone offered an explanation. A man named Leopold Brandeis worked on analyzing the specimens of fallen beef that he had received, preserved in glycerin, only to discover that the meat was not meat at all. Brandeis found that the meat was actually nostoc, a type of bacteria surrounded by a protective gelatinous coating that swells into a translucent mass when it rains. That's a far cry from good Kentucky barbecue meat. The meat rain isn't a common phenomenon, even though nostoc does actually float on the wind all around the world. It seems it's only a matter of time before we start seeing the rain of delicious ribeye steaks. Alligator storm. Everybody knows that the alligator is one of the world's most dangerous and unpredictable animals, so the very idea of random gators falling from the sky is pure nightmare fuel. It's also entirely true. Following a brutal storm in 1843, the residents of Charleston, South Carolina, found themselves in the middle of a frankly bizarre situation. According to a report from the New Orleans Times-Picayune, amidst all the thunder and lightning, a 2-foot-long alligator rained down onto the corner of Wentworth and Anson Street. While nobody apparently witnessed the alligator falling from the sky, the report notes that the important fact that he was there is incontestable. And as he couldn't have got there any other way, it was decided unanimously that he rained down. The article also mentions that the alligator had a look of wonder and bewilderment about him, which, let's be honest, if you're someone that loves animals and gets concerned about stories like this, don't worry. Reports have clarified that the gator was doing as well as an alligator could be expected to do, following what was obviously a Wizard of Oz type bizarro tour of the sky. Star jelly. For those among us that have ever seen a shooting star, did you ever wonder what was happening on the Earth below it? While most people may not have noticed the star itself, you can bet they saw the freaky gelatinous blobs it left behind. Star jelly, as it's known, is an odd, translucent, slimy goo that is believed to fall from shooting stars and meteor showers.
It's just really weird. It looks like crystals, but it's soft jelly.
Texts dating back as far as the 14th century have described the phenomenon in some detail, even specifying that they seem to evaporate pretty quickly, having fallen to the ground. One text, in particular, written by an English physician known as John of Gaddensden, suggests that the star jelly could be used to treat abscesses and other medical problems. Thankfully, nobody took him up on that offer. However, not all gelatinous blobs are actually star jelly. If you happen to find this odd, translucent slime in the fall, it's more likely to be the leftover remains of frog ovaries, which expand in size when in contact with water. Nature is amazingly gross. Star jelly is the stuff that science fiction stories are made of, and it's still commonly believed that this mysterious space jelly is falling all around the world more often than we'd think. We just haven't seen it yet. Rain of body parts. If there's one thing you absolutely don't want to see falling from the sky, it's human body parts. When you're waiting at the intersection in your car, a severed foot falling onto the roof isn't really anybody's idea of a good time. Sadly, not everybody gets a choice. Over the New Year weekend of 2014, residents of Jeddah, Saudi Arabia were pretty shocked to see what looked to be human remains falling at an intersection in a small neighborhood. While many were initially dubious of the claims, police soon confirmed that the whole incident was real, and that the victim was likely an African man that attempted to hide inside an airplane's wheel bay in the hopes that he could slip into the country undetected. It's worth noting that this tactic almost always results in the death of anyone that attempts it, although this is particularly gruesome. Police clarified that the remains fell from the plane once the landing gear was opened, resulting in what I can only imagine was one of the most traumatizing sights you could be unfortunate enough to experience. Waterspouts. A waterspout is a hard phenomenon to classify. While it may not be your conventional rainfall, this does count as rain, particularly if you have the misfortune to get close to it, and especially if you get trapped in the eye of the storm. There are two kinds of waterspouts, fair weather and tornadic. Tornadic waterspouts are, as you'd expect, tornadoes that form over water and that move from land to water. They act pretty much the same way as any land tornado and are almost always accompanied by violent thunderstorms and dangerous seas. Fair weather waterspouts, on the other hand, tend to be marginally less aggressive. These waterspouts form along the dark, flat base of a line of developing cumulus clouds, and they rarely are associated with thunderstorms. If the tornadic waterspouts form down from the sky to the water, the fair weather waterspouts form up from the water to the sky. The waterspout is not necessarily a rare phenomenon, as evidenced by the hundreds of reported sightings, but they are unusual and the kind of things that nobody really wants to experience if you can help it. Rain of money. Finally, a type of rain that we can all get on board with, right? I imagine there's a whole host of people all around the world that have prayed desperately that there will be some incredible windfall. Thank you, of cash raining from the sky. Unfortunately, I doubt they prayed it would land in one of the wealthiest cities on Earth. In 2015, residents of Dubai began to notice something unusual trailing on the wind. Busy roads, packed with cars, came to a standstill as the mysterious phenomenon began to take hold. Surely it couldn't be, but it was. For unknown reasons, Dubai was raining cash. 500 UAE dirham notes, to be exact. Reports estimated that the amount of raining cash could possibly add up to somewhere around $631 million US. Seriously. Immediately, requests began piling up for officials to clarify exactly what this mysterious phenomenon was, but even they were confused. Local news eventually claimed that the cash rain was caused by two bank employees who were attempting to supply notes to an ATM machine in the middle of a sandstorm. Sounds about right. The lack of sandstorms across the Western world means that many of us will sadly never get the joy of grabbing a few $1 million while at a stoplight. But you know what? Miracles can happen. Russian gold. As one of the most desired and valuable commodities in the world, it's fair to say that just about everybody wants some gold. And if it falls from the sky into your lap, well, you might be bruised and have some broken bones, but it's worth it. In 2018, one Russian cargo plane made a most costly error. Nimbus Airlines was scheduled to transport a highly valuable cargo, 9 tons of gold and platinum ingots, as well as a lot of uncut diamonds. In total, it was worth somewhere around $304 million US, or it would have been. In a most unfortunate mishap, these highly valuable treasures were not securely loaded into the cargo hold, resulting in much of the cargo falling out onto Siberia. I don't think I have to explain that the Russian government was very much not happy, do I? We don't really know what happened to the fallen gold, although it's hard to imagine that someone didn't go out of their way to collect a good chunk of it. Whether they managed to get away with it and live to tell the tale, that I'm not sure about. Earthworm rain. Here's an unusual fact about earthworms. They always seem to surface when it rains. If there's been a harsh downpour, there's a strong chance there will be a whole bunch of worms ready for the occasion. It's like me with burgers. Nobody truly knows why earthworms come to the surface when it rains, although many have voiced their own theories.
Big ones, little ones, looks like they're dead.
While those theories tend to be a little bit, shall we say, unsupported, the one with the most evidence to back it up is that earthworms simply find it easier to move across soil when it's wet. It's like if a human tried to use a slip and slide. It's just easier if it's not dry to the bone. Less funny, sure, but it's easier. Thanks to the vibrations caused by the rain hitting the soil, the earthworms know exactly when it's time to breach the surface. Sometimes. Birds have gotten wise to this little trick, and there have been several recorded instances where birds will drum their feet against the soil to fool the worms, bringing them out of the surface into their stomachs. Pretty slick. Rain of frozen iguanas. I think we can all generally agree that 2020 was an absolute dumpster fire of a year for just about everybody. But the warning signs were all there from the beginning. In January, South Florida suffered what we should have heralded as the first sign of impending... Man, I don't know what to call 2020. When temperatures sharply dipped overnight, the Miami National Weather Service made a very public warning of what they called iguana rain. That is pretty much exactly what you expect it to be. Paralyzed lizards falling from the sky. And, contrary to what you may assume, it's not really anything new for Florida. The reason is pretty simple. Iguanas climb trees to roost after dark, but if temperatures take a sudden dip, these creatures are physically stunned and unable to hold onto the trees.
Some of them actually start to come. You can see his eyes are open.
If a sharp wind comes along, they're carried with the breeze, and you can work out the rest. The iguanas don't die from this unusual weather phenomenon and can be revived if the weather warms up relatively quickly. But even then, Floridians are never really that surprised when iguana rain happens. It's just a simple fact of life for most of them. Rain of bats. There's a whole lot of unusual stuff that happens in Australia. I don't think you really need anyone to tell you that. But bats falling from the sky, well, that's a little bit stranger than Vegemite on toast. Although that is pretty weird. It's gross. In 2019, bats became the latest animal to die an unfortunate weather-related death in Australia, as the brutal heatwave killed over 23,000 speckled flying foxes in just 2 days. For most locals and reporters, the extent of the chaos was not apparent until these endangered bats began raining from the skies, as if God was sending a pretty clear and unpleasant warning about climate change or bats or something else. Experts noted that the mysterious pandemic was not a normal incident in Australia, though went on to warn that it would possibly become so if the heat waves become a regular occurrence. It's not quite Vegemite on toast, but the death of over 23,000 endangered animals is not exactly something that should be treated as a regular or normal thing. In fact, it's pretty worrying. But then so is Vegemite on toast. Seriously, Australians? What is that stuff? Fall rain. Hail is a common occurrence in climates all around the world, but we're not here to talk about common occurrences or normal stuff, or even golf. We are here to talk about some weird stuff, and golf ball rain is definitely that. Golf ball rain is a special kind of hail, a large, frozen raindrop that is basically just a hunk of falling ice. Anybody that's ever been caught out in a hailstorm will know all about just how painful it can be. But golf ball rain? That's when a hailstone is about as big as a golf ball. This rare phenomenon has been known to smash windows, as well as causing severe injuries and significant damage to anything that it touches. So pretty much like getting hit by a golf ball, right? Only you have the further misery of the fact that it's quite literally freezing cold too. Golf ball rain can be brutal and costly, both for the victim and for the owner of the car that's just been totaled by a bit of hail. Thankfully, it's not exactly a daily occurrence, but we'd still advise that you ice-proof your car in advance. And by that we mean, just don't leave the house. I'll work on the slogan. Rain of Frogs. The legend of raining frogs has been around since biblical times, but there are more than enough recorded incidents to confirm that it's absolutely true. Frogs can and often do get rained down onto the unsuspecting public. On August 4th, 1921, the city of Calgary on 11th Avenue, seemingly out of nowhere, the skies opened up to unleash what must have felt like a constant torrent of perfectly healthy living frogs. Suffice to say, the public were shocked, stunned, and utterly confused. Since then, there have been a whole bunch of new reports of falling frogs, and a whole bunch of explanations to try and clarify what must be an unsettling phenomenon for many. The current theory is that these animals simply get swept up in passing tornadoes and are eventually thrust back into the wild, where they fall back to the ground. Simple. The rain of frogs is probably one of the most famous and well-known types of weird rain in the world, although that doesn't necessarily mean it happens a lot. Only when a tornado passes over a body of water can the frog storm begin. Let's hope Kermit stays indoors during storm season, eh? Blood rain. It sounds like something out of a horror movie. The sky begins to open, releasing a kind of unusual rain that is blood red in hue. But this is the most frightening horror movie of all time because it's real life. And none of us are having a good time. Send help. Anyway, blood rain actually has nothing to do with blood whatsoever. It's simply the term used for when rain carries sand from the nearby desert, giving the water droplets a red hue. That color is apparently so intense that a single drenching of this rain can coat houses, cars, and garden furniture with ease. Of course, given that this rain requires some nearby desert terrain, this isn't something you're going to see in the big city. But in areas close to the Sahara, events like this are not unheard of. And there have even been recorded instances happening as far away from the desert as Scandinavia. Blood rain is not a pleasant kind of rain. It will stain your clothes, your belongings, and likely your skin with its weird hue. But it's also something you can't really forget. And it's actually so unusual that it's kind of cool. I never thought I'd say that rain is cool. This job has really